Poland, France and Germany vowed to make Europe a security and defense power in response to Trump's NATO remarks.
Spanish, Polish and Moldovan farmers continue their mass protests against EU policies, unfair competition and insufficient government subsidies.
Israel is facing growing international pressure over its intentions to launch an all-out military assault on the city of Rafah in southern Gaza. With more than 1.5 million people now crammed into the city, promises from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of evacuating civilians have been slammed by Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign policy chief.
Everybody goes to Tel Aviv, begging, please, don't do that. Protect civilians, don't kill so many. How many is too many? Which is the standard? But Netanyahu doesn't listen to anyone. They are going to evacuate. Where? To the moon? Where are they going to evacuate these people?
The UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron, speaking in Scotland, was more diplomatic.
Really, we think is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't go south into Egypt. They can't go north and back to their homes because many have been destroyed.
Whilst Netanyahu has been focusing on the successful rescue of 2 Israeli hostages from Gaza, he's been congratulating the soldiers who mounted the dramatic operation. Israel's military has released footage of the rescue, showing the moment the soldiers moved in to extract the 2 men. At least 67 Palestinians were killed in support airstrikes launched nearby the rescue. With Israel believing Rafah and southern Gaza are Hamas strongholds, hostilities continue. The WHO say hospitals are overwhelmed and undersupplied. Over 20,000 people are sheltering in the European Gaza hospital, with no safe place to go. The governments of Poland, France and Germany have vowed to make Europe a security and defense power with a greater ability to back Ukraine. It's the message new Prime Minister Donald Tusk took to both Paris and Berlin as he tries to revitalize his nation's relations with key European partners. Fears grow that former President Donald Trump might return to the White House and allow Russia to expand its aggression.
Europa musi stać się kontynentem bezpiecznym, a to oznacza, że Unia Europejska, Francja, Polska muszą się stać państwami silnymi i gotowymi do obrony własnych granic, własnego terytorium i do obrony i wsparcia naszych sojuszników i przyjaciół spoza Unii Europejskiej.
Tusk then headed for Berlin. His diplomatic push comes after Trump shocked many in Europe over the weekend by appearing to invite Russia to invade any NATO member not spending enough on its own defense. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz blasted Donald Trump's comments without mentioning him.
Das Schutzversprechen der NATO gilt uneingeschränkt. Alle für einen, einer für alle. Und lassen Sie mich aus aktuellem Anlass klar sagen, jegliche Relativierung der Beistandsgarantie der NATO ist unverantwortlich und gefährlich und ist einzig und allein im Sinne Russlands. Niemand darf mit Europas Sicherheit spielen oder dealen.
The one-time president of the European Council, Tusk, says he sees the European Union becoming a military power in its own right.
Russian forces appear to have constructed a 30-kilometer-long barrier dubbed the Tsar Train in occupied Donetsk region, possibly to serve as a defensive line against future Ukrainian assaults. The Institute for the Study of War says satellite imagery dated on the 10th of May 2023 and then the 6th and the 10th of February 2024 shows that Russian forces constructed a long line of train cars stretching from occupied Olenivka, south of Donetsk city, to Volnovaha, southeast of Vuhledar and north of Mariupol over the past 9 months. A Ukrainian open-source intelligence interactive online map of the military operations Deep State reported on the 11th of February that Russian forces have assembled more than 2,100 freight cars into a 30-kilometer-long train. The source reported that Russian forces began assembling the train in July 2023 and suggested that Russian forces intend to use the train as a defensive line against future Ukrainian assaults. The railway line between Olenivka and Volnovaha is roughly 6 kilometers from the Institute for the Study of War's current assessed front line southeast of Novomykhailivka at its closest point, and is in the area of the front that was relatively inactive when Russian forces reportedly began construction. Russian forces have recently made marginal territorial gains in this area. The Institute for the Study of War says the Russians could have assembled the train for other purposes as well.
It's been 7 days and counting as Spanish farmers continued their nationwide protests with tractors and roadblocks against the EU's sustainability policies. They are also demanding support in the face of the effects of drought and rising production costs. For the past 3 years, the country has been in the grips of a severe drought, which has depleted water stores, impacting the majority of farmlands.
En mis últimos 2 años tenemos unas pérdidas, por ejemplo, con el cereal de un 40%.
Y este año pasado la sequía, una ruina. Tenía que haber dado el cereal a 4.000 kilos en secano y te ha dado a 1.000.
On Monday, Moldovan farmers blocked the main gateway road to Romania. The Farmers' Force Association is protesting against diesel fuel donations from Romania and insufficient government subsidies. They say farmers need help to alleviate the losses suffered in the last 2 years, and an injection of government cash is needed, or there will be no spring sowing of crops. Meanwhile, in Poland, farmers spilled Ukrainian grain on the road as part of their latest protest. The country has been hit hard by the introduction of so-called solidarity corridors to facilitate food exports from Ukraine after Russia invaded the country. Instead of transiting further, much of the Ukrainian produce is stuck on the national market, causing a decline in the demand and prices for local Polish production.
3 victims were shot dead this Monday in the offices of a shipping company in Greece. The owner of the company near Athens was among the victims. The alleged perpetrator, who police say was a former employee, was also found dead. Greek media reported that the gunman killed 2 men and a woman before turning the gun on himself. According to witnesses, the man, identified as being in his 70s, entered the building armed with a shotgun and a pistol.
The Spanish police has announced the arrest of 3 people in Barcelona linked to the 18th Street Gang, a powerful transnational criminal organization with roots in the United States and Central America. Investigations began in October 2023 after a growing number of crimes linked to members of the Latin American diaspora were reported in the city. Some suspects boasted publicly about their affiliation with Calle 18. The FBI was involved in the operation.
Solar panel manufacturers in Europe say the sector is facing an existential challenge from heavily subsidized Chinese competitors. According to insiders, Chinese solar panel manufacturers have a near monopoly on the sector, and if no measures are taken, Europe's industry could collapse within months. European manufacturers have asked the European Commission for emergency aid, including the purchase of accumulated stock to provide liquidity.
So China has been subsidizing their industry for more than a decade. They took a strategic decision for more than 15 years ago that they saw PV as a strategic technology. They have done so in other areas such as electrical vehicles and batteries, etc.
Lower prices elsewhere have made several companies decide to relocate outside of the continent, whilst others have made staff redundant.
Para luchar contra la feroz competencia china y evitar caer en la bancarrota, fábricas como esta, SolarEdge, en Países Bajos se han tenido que adaptar e innovar muchísimo más. Por ejemplo, creando este panel solar, que es mucho más ligero que los habituales y se puede instalar en tejados que no soportan el peso.
But even for those innovators, the situation could soon become untenable.
If it takes 1 or 2 years, a lot of companies and also us, we will see some impact, definitely, with having to go down with price levels and being less competitive and profitable.
Chinese competition not only endangers companies, but also could affect Europe's industrial independence. A module produced in China is about 50% cheaper than one made in Europe. Meanwhile, European producers account for only 3% of the EU market. In the medium term, the EU has 2 directives almost finalised that could reduce competition. The first would require 40% of the clean technologies installed in the EU to be manufactured here as well. The second would prohibit the sale in the EU of products made with forced labour, something that happens in several areas of China. The European Commission has not yet announced any emergency measures and is still assessing the situation.
It's important that the solar market in Europe keeps growing, because we're still not at the levels that we need to reach the 2030 targets. So any industrial strategy for the manufacturing needs to make sure that it doesn't impact negatively the continued growth of the European solar markets.
Striking the right balance is essential for the EU. Solar energy is one of the cheapest and easiest to install, so rapid deployment could make a difference in meeting climate targets. By 2030, 42.5% of all EU energy will have to come from renewable sources.